In ordinary language, a crime is an unlawful act punishable by a state or other authority. The term crime does not, in modern criminal law, have any simple and universally accepted definition, though statutory definitions have been provided for certain purposes. The most popular view is that crime is a category created by law. In other words, something is a crime if declared as such by the relevant and applicable law. One proposed definition is that a crime or offense is an act harmful not only to some individual but also to a community, society, or the state. Such acts are forbidden and punishable by law. The notion that acts such as murder, rape, and theft are to be prohibited exists worldwide. What precisely is a criminal offense is defined by the criminal law of each relevant jurisdiction. While many have a catalogue of crimes called the Criminal Code, in some common law nations no such comprehensive statute exists. The state has the power to severely restrict one's liberty for committing a crime. In modern societies, there are procedures to which investigations and trials must adhere. If found guilty, an offender may be sentenced to a form of reparation such as a community sentence, or, depending on the nature of their offense, to undergo imprisonment, life imprisonment or, in some jurisdictions, death. Some jurisdictions sentence individuals to programs to emphasize or provide for their rehabilitation, while most jurisdictions sentence individuals with the goal of punishing them or a mix of the aforementioned practices. Usually, to be classified as a crime, the act of doing something criminal must with certain exceptions be accompanied by the intention to do something criminal. While every crime violates the law, not every violation of the law counts as a crime. Breaches of private law are not automatically punished by the state, but can be enforced through civil procedure. Name. The classical name for Crimea, Taurus, or Taurica, is from the Greek tau alpha upsilon rho iota kappa, after the peninsula's Scytho-Cimmerian inhabitants, the Tauri. Today, the Crimean Tatar name of the peninsula is Qrm, while the Russian is, and the Ukrainian is. Strabo, Polybius, and Ptolemy refer variously to the Strait of Kerch as the kappa iota mu mu epsilon rho iota kappa beta sigma pi omicron rho omicron, its easternmost part as the kappa iota mu mu rho iota omicron nu kappa rho omicron nu, as well as to the city of Cimmerium and thence the name of the kingdom of the Cimmerian Bosporus. The city Ster-Ikrym served as a capital of the Crimean province of the Golden Horde. Between 1315 and 1329 CE, the Arab writer Abd al-Fid recounted a political fight in 1301 CE which resulted in a rival's decapitation and his head being sent to the Crimea, apparently in reference to the peninsula, although some sources hold that the name of the capital was extended to the entire peninsula at some point during Ottoman suzerainty. The origin of the word Qrm is uncertain. Suggestions argued in various sources include a corruption of Cimmerium, a derivation from the Turkic term Kairum, from Kori. Other suggestions, either unsupported or contradicted by sources, apparently based on similarity in sound, include a derivation from the Greek kremnoi cited by Herodotus in the Histories 4.20.1 and 4.110.2. However, Herodotus identifies the port not in Crimea, but as being on the west coast of the Sea of Azov. No evidence has been identified that this name was ever in use for the peninsula. The Turkic term is related to the Mongolian appellation Kerm Wal, but sources indicate that the Mongolian appellation of the Crimean peninsula of Kerem is phonetically incompatible with Kerm/Kerem and therefore deriving from another original term. The spelling Crimea is the Italian form, i.e., La Crimea, since at least the 17th century, and the Crimean peninsula becomes current during the 18th century, gradually replacing the classical name of Tauric Peninsula in the course of the 19th century. In English usage since the early modern period, the Crimean Khanate is referred to as Crim Tartary. The omission of the definite article in English became common during the later 20th century. The classical name was used in 1802 in the name of the Russian Taurida Governorate. While it was replaced with Krym in the Soviet Union and has had no official status since 1921, it is still used by some institutions in Crimea, such as the Taurida National University, the Tavria Simferopol Football Club, or the Tavrida Federal Highway. History. Ancient history. The recorded history of the Crimean Peninsula begins around the 5th century BCE when several Greek colonies were established along its coast, the most important of which was Chersonesos near modern-day Sevastopol, with Scythians and Tauri in the hinterland to the north. The Tauri gave the name the Tauric Peninsula, which Crimea was called into the early modern period. The southern coast gradually consolidated into the Bosporan kingdom, which was annexed by Pontus and then became a client kingdom of Rome from 63 BCE to 341 CE. Medieval history. The south coast remained Greek in culture for almost 2,000 years, including under Roman successor states, the Byzantine Empire, the Empire of Trebizond, and the independent Principality of Theodoro. In the 13th century, some Crimean port cities were controlled by the Venetians and by the Genoese, but the interior was much less stable, enduring a long series of conquests and invasions. In the medieval period, it was partially conquered by Kievan Rus, whose prince was baptized at Sevastopol, starting the Christianization of Kievan Rus. Mongol conquest. The north and center of Crimea fell to the Mongol Golden Horde, although the south coast was still controlled by the Christian Principality of Theodoro and Genoese colonies. The Genoese-Mongol wars were fought between the 13th and 15th centuries for control of South Crimea. Crimean Khanate. In the 1440s the Crimean Khanate formed out of the collapse of the Horde, but quite rapidly itself became subject to the Ottoman Empire, which also conquered the coastal areas which had kept independent of the Khanate. A major source of prosperity in these times were frequent raids into Russia for slaves. Russian Empire. In 1774, the Ottoman Empire was defeated by Catherine the Great with the Treaty of Kukuk-Kainarksa, making the Tatars of the Crimea politically independent. Catherine the Great's incorporation of the Crimea in 1783 into the Russian Empire increased Russia's power in the Black Sea area. From 1853 to 1856, the strategic position of the peninsula in controlling the Black Sea meant that it was the site of the principal engagements of the Crimean War, where Russia lost to a French-led alliance. Russian Civil War. During the Russian Civil War, Crimea changed hands many times and was where Wrangel's anti-Bolshevik White Army made their last stand. Many anti-communist fighters and civilians escaped to Istanbul, but up to 150,000 were killed in Crimea. Soviet Union. In 1921 the Crimean Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic was created as part of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. It was occupied by Germany from 1942 to 1944 during the Second World War. After the Soviets regained control in 1944, they deported the Crimean Tatars and several other nationalities to elsewhere in the USSR. The Autonomous Republic was dissolved in 1945, and Crimea became an oblast of the Russian SFSR. It was transferred to the Ukrainian SSR in 1954, on the 300th anniversary of the Treaty of Pereyaslav. Ukraine. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union and Ukrainian independence in 1991, most of the peninsula was reorganized as the Republic of Crimea, although in 1995 the republic was forcibly abolished by Ukraine, with the Autonomous Republic of Crimea established firmly under Ukrainian authority. A 1997 treaty partitioned the Soviet Black Sea Fleet, allowing Russia to continue basing its fleet in Sevastopol, with the lease extended in 2010. Russian occupation. Geography. Covering an area of 27,000 square kilometers, Crimea is located on the northern coast of the Black Sea and on the western coast of the Sea of Azov. The only land border is shared with Ukraine's Kherson Oblast on the north. Crimea is almost an island and only connected to the continent by the Isthmus of Perikho, a strip of land about 5-7 kilometers wide. Much of the natural border between the Crimean Peninsula and the Ukrainian mainland comprises the Savash or Rotten Sea, a large system of shallow lagoons stretching along the western shore of the Sea of Azov. Besides the Isthmus of Perikho, the peninsula is connected to the Kherson Oblast's Hennikisk Rayon by bridges over the narrow Konyar and Hennikisk Straits and over Kerch Strait to the Krasnodar Krai. The northern part of Arabat Spit is administratively part of Hennikisk Rayon in Kherson Oblast, including its two rural communities of Shchasly-Athsev and Strilkov. The eastern tip of the Crimean Peninsula comprises the Kerch Peninsula, separated from Taman Peninsula on the Russian mainland by the Kerch Strait, which connects the Black Sea with the Sea of Azov, at a width of between 3–13 kilometers. Geographers generally divide the peninsula into three zones: steppe, mountains, and southern coast. Places. Given its long history and many conquerors, most towns in Crimea have several names. West, the Isthmus of Perikho/Perikho/ or Kapi, about 7 kilometers wide, connects Crimea to the mainland. It was often fortified and sometimes garrisoned by the Turks. The North Crimean Canal now crosses it to bring water from the Dnieper. To the west, Karkinit Bay separates the Tarkongkut Peninsula from the mainland. On the north side of the peninsula is Chernomorsk/Kalos Liman. On the south side is the large Donoslav Bay and the port and ancient Greek settlement of Yevpatoria/Kirkinitis/Gozlev. The coast then runs south to Sevastopol/Chersonsis, a good natural harbor, great naval base and the largest city on the peninsula. At the head of Sevastopol Bay stands Inkerman/Kalamita. South of Sevastopol is the small Heracles Peninsula. South, in the south, between the Crimean Mountains and the sea runs a narrow coastal strip which was held by the Genoese and by the Turks. Under Russian rule it became a kind of riviera. In Soviet times the many palaces were replaced with dachas and health resorts. From west to east are Heracles Peninsula, Balaklava/Cymbeline/Chembalo, a smaller natural harbor south of Sevastopol, Foros, the southernmost point, Alupka with the Vorontsov Palace, Gaspra, Yalta, Gurzutov, Alashta. Further east is Sudak/Sugdia/Soldea with its Genoese fort. Further east still is Theodosia/Kaffa/Feodosia, once a great slave mart and a kind of capital for the Genoese and Turks. Unlike the other southern ports, Feodosia has no mountains to its north. At the east end of the 90 km Kerch Peninsula is Kerch/Pantikapaum, once the capital of the Bosporan Kingdom. Just south of Kerch the new Crimean Bridge connects Crimea to the Taman Peninsula. Sea of Azov, there is little on the south shore. The west shore is marked by the Arabat Spit. Behind it is the Savash or Putrid Sea, a system of lakes and marshes which in the far north extend west to the Perikho Isthmus. Road and rail bridges cross the northern part of Savash. Interior. Most of the former capitals of Crimea stood on the north side of the mountains. Mangup/Doros. Bakhchisarai. Southeast of Bakhchisarai is the cliff fort of Chufutkail/Kirk, or which was used in more warlike times. Simferopol/AK Mekhet, the modern capital. Karasubazar/Bilahorsk was a commercial center. Sokat/Sturai Ikrym was the old Tatar capital. Towns on the northern steppe area are all modern, notably Jankoy, a major road and rail junction. Rivers. The longest is the Salhir, which rises southeast of Simferopol and flows north and northeast to the Sea of Azov. The Alma flows west to reach the Black Sea between Yevpatoria and Sevastopol. The shorter Chania flows west to Sevastopol Bay. Nearby, east of the Kerch Strait, the ancient Greeks founded colonies at Phanagoria, Hermanassa, Gorgippia. At the northeast point of the Sea of Azov at the mouth of the Don River were Tanas, Azak/Azov and now Rostov-on-Don. North of the peninsula the Dnieper turns westward and enters the Black Sea through the east-west Dnieperbug estuary, which also receives the Bug River. At the mouth of the Bug stood Alvia. At the mouth of the estuary is Okakiv. Odessa stands where the coast turns southwest. Further southwest is Tyrus/Ackerman/Bilhorodinostrovskyi. Crimean Mountains. The southeast coast is flanked at a distance of 8–12 kilometers from the sea by a parallel range of mountains, the Crimean Mountains. These mountains are backed by secondary parallel ranges. The main range of these mountains rises with extraordinary abruptness from the deep floor of the Black Sea to an altitude of 601,545 meters, beginning at the southwest point of the peninsula, called Cape Fiolant. Some Greek myths state that this cape was supposedly crowned with the temple of Artemis where Iphigenia officiated as priestess. Uchinsu, on the south slope of the mountains, is the highest waterfall in Crimea. Hydrography. There are 257 rivers and major streams on the Crimean Peninsula. They are primarily fed by rainwater, with snowmelt playing a very minor role. This makes for significant annual fluctuation in water flow, with many streams drying up completely during the summer. The largest rivers are the Salhir, the Kika, the Alma, and the Belbek. Also important are the Kokazka, the Indol, the Kurna, the Durikoika, the Karasubashi, the Burulcha, the Uchinsu, and the Uluzan. The longest river of Crimea is the Salhir at 204 kilometers. The Belbek has the greatest average discharge at 2.16 cubic meters per second. The Alma and the Kika are the second and third longest rivers. There are more than 50 salt lakes and salt pans on the peninsula. The largest of them is Lake Saysik on the southwest coast. Others include Aktas, Koyashskoy, Kievsku, Kurlutsku, Kyzylyar, Bakalsku, and Donoslov. The general trend is for the former lakes to become salt pans. Lake Sivash is a system of interconnected shallow lagoons on the northeastern coast, covering an area of around 2,560 square kilometers. A number of dams have created reservoirs. Among the largest are the Simferopolskoy, Almanskoy, the Tayagansky and the Bailogorsky just south of Bylahersk in Bylahersk rayon. The North Crimea Canal, which transports water from the Dnieper, is the largest of the man-made irrigation channels on the peninsula. Crimea is facing an unprecedented water shortage crisis. Steppe. 75% of the remaining area of Crimea consists of semi-arid prairie lands, a southward continuation of the Pontic-Caspian steppe, which slope gently to the northwest from the foothills of the Crimean Mountains. Numerous kurgans, or burial mounds, of the ancient Scythians are scattered across the Crimean steppes. Crimean Riviera. The terrain that lies south of the sheltering Crimean mountain range is of an altogether different character. Here, the narrow strip of coast and the slopes of the mountains are smothered with greenery. This Riviera stretches along the southeast coast from Capes Fiolant and Iya, in the south, to Feodosia. It is studded with summer sea bathing resorts such as Alupka, Yalta, Gurzaev, Alashta, Sudak, and Feodosia. During the years of Soviet rule, the resorts and dachas of this coast served as prime perquisites of the politically loyal. In addition, vineyards and fruit orchards are located in the region. Fishing, mining, and the production of essential oils are also important. Numerous Crimean Tatar villages, mosques, monasteries, and palaces of the Russian imperial family and nobles are found here, as well as picturesque ancient Greek and medieval castles. The Crimean Mountains and the southern coast are part of the Crimean submediterranean forest complex Korjun. The natural vegetation consists of scrublands, woodlands, and forests, with a climate and vegetation similar to the Mediterranean basin. Climate. Crimea is located between the temperate and subtropical climate belts and is characterized by warm and sunny weather. It is characterized by diversity and the presence of microclimates. The northern parts of Crimea have a moderate continental climate with short but cold winters and moderately hot dry summers. In the central and mountainous areas the climate is transitional between the continental climate to the north and the Mediterranean climate to the south. Winters are mild at lower altitudes and colder at higher altitudes. Summers are hot at lower altitudes and warm in the mountains. A subtropical, Mediterranean climate dominates the southern coastal regions, is characterized by mild winters and moderately hot, dry summers. The climate of Crimea is influenced by its geographic location, relief, and influences from the Black Sea. The Crimean coast is shielded from cold air masses coming from the north and, as a result, has milder winters. Maritime influences from the Black Sea are restricted to coastal areas. In the interior of the peninsula the maritime influence is weak and does not play an important role. Because a high-pressure system is located north of Crimea in both summer and winter, winds predominantly come from the north and northeast year-round. In winter these winds bring in cold, dry continental air, while in summer they bring in dry and hot weather. Winds from the northwest bring warm and wet air from the Atlantic Ocean, causing precipitation during spring and summer. As well, winds from the southwest bring very warm and wet air from the subtropical latitudes of the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea and cause precipitation during fall and winter. Mean annual temperatures range from 10 degrees Celsius in the far north to 13 degrees Celsius in the far south. In the mountains, the mean annual temperature is around 5.7 degrees Celsius. For every 100 m increase in altitude, temperatures decrease by 0.65 degrees Celsius while precipitation increases. In January mean temperatures range from 3 degrees C in Armyansk to 4.4 degrees Celsius in Miskhor. Cool season temperatures average around 7 degrees Celsius and it is rare for the weather to drop below freezing except in the mountains, where there is usually snow. In July mean temperatures range from 15.4 degrees Celsius in Aipetri to 23.4 degrees Celsius in the central parts of Crimea to 24.4 degrees Celsius in Miskhor. The frost-free period ranges from 160 to 200 days in the steppe and mountain regions to 240 to 60 days on the south coast. Precipitation in Crimea varies significantly based on location. It ranges from 310 mm in Chernomorsk to 1,220 mm at the highest altitudes in the Crimean Mountains. The Crimean Mountains greatly influence the amount of precipitation present in the peninsula. However, most of Crimea receives 300 to 500 mm of precipitation per year. The plains usually receive 300 to 400 mm of precipitation per year, increasing to 560 mm in the southern coast at sea level. The western parts of the Crimean Mountains receive more than 1,000 mm of precipitation per year. Snowfall is common in the mountains during winter. Most of the peninsula receives more than 2,000 sunshine hours per year. It reaches up to 2,505 sunshine hours in Karabiela in the Crimean Mountains. As a result, the climate favors recreation and tourism. Because of its climate and subsidized travel packages from Russian state-run companies, the southern Crimean coast has remained a popular resort for Russian tourists. Strategic value. The Black Sea ports of Crimea provide quick access to the eastern Mediterranean, Balkans, and Middle East. Historically, possession of the southern coast of Crimea was sought after by most empires of the greater region since antiquity. The nearby Dnieper River is a major waterway and transportation route that crosses the European continent from north to south and ultimately links the Black Sea with the Baltic Sea, of strategic importance since the historical trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks. The Black Sea serves as an economic thoroughfare connecting the Caucasus region and the Caspian Sea to Central and Eastern Europe. According to the International Transport Workers Federation, as of 2013 there were at least 12 operating merchant seaports in Crimea. Economy. In 2016, Crimea had nominal GDP of $7 billion and $3,000 per capita. The main branches of the modern Crimean economy are agriculture and fishing, oysters, pearls, industry and manufacturing, tourism, and ports. Industrial plants are situated for the most part in the southern coast regions of the republic, few northern, aside from the central area, mainly Simferopol Okrug and eastern region in Nizhnegorsk city. Important industrial cities include Jankoy, housing a major railway connection, Krasnoperikosk, and Armyansk, among others. After the Russian annexation of Crimea in early 2014 and subsequent sanctions targeting Crimea, the tourist industry suffered major losses for 2 years. The flow of holidaymakers dropped 35% in the first half of 2014 over the same period of 2013. The number of tourist arrivals reached a record in 2012 at 6.1 million. According to the Russian administration of Crimea, they dropped to 3.8 million in 2014, and rebounded to 5.6 million by 2016. The most important industries in Crimea include food production, chemical fields, mechanical engineering and metalworking, and fuel production industries. 60% of the industry market belongs to food production. There are a total of 291 large industrial enterprises and 1,002 small business enterprises. In 2014, the republic's annual GDP was $4.3 billion. The average salary was $290 per month. The budget deficit was $1.5 billion. Agriculture. Agriculture in the region includes cereals, vegetable growing, gardening, and winemaking, particularly in the Yalta and Massandra regions. Livestock production includes cattle breeding, poultry keeping, and sheep breeding. Other products produced on the Crimean Peninsula include salt, porphyry, limestone, and ironstone since ancient times. The vine mealybug was first discovered here in 1868. First discovered on grape, it has also been found as a pest of some other crops and has since spread worldwide. Sun pests, especially Eurygaster integriceps and E. mora, are significant grain pests. Celianini and Tachynidae are important parasitoids of sun pest. Bark beetles are pests of tree crops, and are themselves hosts for elatoma mites and various entomopathogenic fungi transmitted by those elatomi. Energy. Crimea also possesses several natural gas fields both onshore and offshore, which were starting to be drilled by Western oil and gas companies before annexation. The inland fields are located in Chernomorsk and Jankoy, while offshore fields are located in the western coast in the Black Sea and in the northeastern coast in the Azov Sea. The Republic also possesses 2 oil fields, one onshore, the Serebryansk oil field in Rozdolny, and one offshore, the Subotina oil field in the Black Sea. Electricity. Crimea has 540 MW of its own electricity generation capacity, including the 100 MW Simferopol thermal power plant, the 22 MW Sevastopol thermal power plant and the 19 MW Kamysh-Burunskaya thermal power plant. This local electricity generation has proven insufficient for local consumption, and since annexation by Russia, Crimea has been reliant on an underwater power cable to mainland Russia. This power production is set to be bolstered by the building of and near startup of 2 combined cycle gas steam turbo-thermal plants PGU, both providing 470 MW, a build by TPE along others with turbines provided by Power Machines, NPO Saturn with PERM PMZ, either GTD 110M modified or GTE 160 or 180 units or UTS. KTZ or AV 94.2 bought by MAPNA, modified in Russian plants for PGU thermal plants specifics. Also many solar photovoltaic SES plants lie along the peninsula, in addition to a smaller facility north of Sevastopol. There also is the gas thermal Saki plant located close to Jodobrom chemical plant and 6 boosted production with PERM GTE GTU-25 PPGU turbogenerators. Older plants in operation include the Sevastopol Tech, which uses AEG and GANS electro turbines and turbogenerators generating about 25 MW each, Simferopol Tech Yevpatoria, Kamishburun Tech and a few others. Transport. Crimean Bridge. In May 2015, work began on a multi-billion-dollar road rail link across the Kerch Strait. The road bridge opened in May 2018, and the rail bridge opened in December 2019. With a length of 19 kilometers, it is the longest bridge in Europe, as it overcame Vasco da Gama Bridge in Lisbon. This bridge was damaged during an attack on October 8, 2022. Public transportation. Almost every settlement in Crimea is connected with another settlement by bus lines. Crimea contains the longest trolley bus route in the world, founded in 1959, stretching from Simferopol to Yalta. The trolley bus line starts near Simferopol's railway station through the mountains to Alashta and on to Yalta. The length of line is about 90 kilometers and passengers are assigned a seat. Simferopol, Yalta, and Alashta also have an urban and suburban trolley bus network. Trolleybuses are also operated in Sevastopol and Kerch. In the city of Yevpatoria a tram system is also operated. In the nearby townlet village of Molokhnoi, a 1.6 km long tram line provides the only connection between the seashore and a holiday resort, but its operation is halted since 2015. Railway traffic. There are 2 railroad lines running through Crimea, the non-electrified Armyansk-Kerch, and the electrified Melitopol-Simferopol-Sevastopol, connecting Crimea to the Ukrainian mainland. Until 2014 the network was part of the Sysnapor Directorate of the Ukrainian Railways. Long-distance trains provided connection to every major Ukrainian cities, but also to many towns of Russia, Belarus, and until the end of the 2000s even to Vilnius, Riga, Warsaw and Berlin. Since 2014 the railways are operated by the Crimea Railway. Local trains belong to the Yuzhnaya Prigorodnaya Passagirskaya Kompania, serving the entire network of the peninsula and via the Crimean Bridge 3 trains daily to Anapa. Long-distance trains under the name Tavriya operated by the company Grand Service Express connect Sevastopol and Simferopol daily with Moscow and St. Petersburg. In the summer season Yevpatoria and Feodosia are also directly connected by them. Several times a week Simferopol is also linked with Volgograd, Sochi, Ekaterinburg, Omsk, and even Murmansk by train. Further development plans consist a bypass line between Simferopol and Kerch, and a complete electrification of the network with changing the voltage of the already electrified lines from 3 kV DC to 25 kV 50 Hz AC. International Airport. Simferopol International Airport's new terminal opened in from April 2018 with the ability to handle 6.5 million passengers a year. It was built in 22 months and covers an area of 78,000 square meters. Highways. Tavrida Highway Sevastopol Simferopol by Lahursk North Feodosia Kerch South E105/M18 Sivash, Jankoy, North Crimean Canal, Simferopol, Alashta, Yalta. E97/M17 Periko, Armyansk, Jankoy, Feodosia, Kerch. A290 Novorossiysk to Kerch via the Crimean Bridge. H05 Krasnoperikosk, Simferopol. H06 Simferopol, Bakhchisarai, Sevastopol. H19 Yalta, Sevastopol. P16. P23 Simferopol, Feodosia. P25 Simferopol, Yevpatoria. P27 Sevastopol, Inkerman. P29 Alishta, Sudak, Feodosia. P34 Alishta, Yalta. P35 Hrushivka, Sudak. P58 Sevastopol, Port Komi Shivabukta. P59C transport. The cities of Yalta, Feodosia, Kerch, Sevastopol, Chernomorsk, and Yevpatoria are connected to one another by sea routes. Tourism. The development of Crimea as a holiday destination began in the second half of the 19th century. The development of the transport networks brought masses of tourists from central parts of the Russian Empire. At the beginning of the 20th century, a major development of palaces, villas, and dachas began, most of which remain. These are some of the main attractions of Crimea as a tourist destination. There are many Crimean legends about famous touristic places, which attract the attention of tourists. A new phase of tourist development began when the Soviet government started promoting the healing quality of the local air, lakes, and therapeutic muds. It became a health destination for Soviet workers, and hundreds of thousands of Soviet tourists visited Crimea. Artek is a former young pioneer camp on the Black Sea in the town of Herzaev, near Audag, established in 1925. By 1969 it had an area of 3.2 square kilometers, and consisted of 150 buildings. Unlike most of the young pioneer camps, Artek was an all-year camp, due to the warm climate. Artek was considered to be a privilege for Soviet children during its existence, as well as for children from other communist countries. During its heyday, 27,000 children a year vacationed at Artek. Between 1925 and 1969, the camp hosted 300,000 children. After the breaking up of the Young Pioneers in 1991, its prestige declined, though it remained a popular vacation destination. In the 1990s, Crimea became more of a getaway destination than a health improvement destination. The most visited areas are the south shore of Crimea with cities of Yalta and Alishta, the western shore Yevpatoria and Saki, and the southeastern shore Feodosia and Sudak. According to National Geographic, Crimea was among the top 20 travel destinations in 2013. Places of interest include sanctions. Following Russia's largely unrecognized annexation of Crimea, the European Union, the United States, Canada, Australia, Japan, and several other countries imposed economic sanctions against Russia, including some specifically targeting Crimea. Many of these sanctions were directed at individuals, both Russian and Crimean. In general, they prohibit the sale, supply, transfer, or export of goods and technology in several sectors, including services directly related to tourism and infrastructure. They list 7 ports where cruise ships cannot dock. Sanctions against individuals include travel bans and asset freezes. Visa and MasterCard temporarily stopped service in Crimea in December 2014. The Russian national payment card system now allows Visa and MasterCard cards issued by Russian banks to work in Crimea. The Mir payment system operated by the Central Bank of Russia operates in Crimea as well as MasterCard and Visa. However, there are no major international banks in the Crimea. Politics. Crimea is Ukrainian territory currently occupied by Russia. Ukraine has not relinquished title over the Crimean territory since the events of 2014. Crimea is internationally recognized as part of Ukraine. They exercise in extremis administration of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea from Kyiv in the Ministry of Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories. Ukrainian President Zelensky drew attention to this fact in August 2022 when he stated that it was necessary to liberate Crimea from Russian occupation and to re-establish world law and order. Demographics. As of 2014, the total population of the Republic of Crimea and Sevastopol was 2,248,400 people. This is down from the 2001 Ukrainian census figure, which was 2,376,000. According to the 2014 Russian census, 84% of Crimean inhabitants named Russian as their native language, 7.9% Crimean Tatar, 3.7% Tatar, and 3.3% Ukrainian. It was the first official census in Crimea since a Ukrainian-held census in 2001. According to the 2001 census, 77% of Crimean inhabitants named Russian as their native language, 11.4% Crimean Tatar, and 10.1% Ukrainian. In 2013, however, the Crimean Tatar language was estimated to be on the brink of extinction, being taught in Crimea only in around 15 schools at that point. Turkey provided the greatest support to Tatars in Ukraine, which had been unable to resolve the problem of education in their mother tongue in Crimea, by bringing the schools to a modern state. Ethnic composition of Crimea's population has changed dramatically since the early 20th century. The 1897 Russian Empire census for the Taurida Governorate reported 196,854 Crimean Tatars, 404,463 Russians, and 611,121 Ukrainians. But these numbers included Berdiansky, Dneprovsky, and Melitopolsky uyezds, which were on mainland, not in Crimea. The population number excluding these uyezds is given in the table below. Crimean Tatars, a predominantly Muslim ethnic minority who in 2001 made up 12.1% of the population, formed in Crimea in the early modern era, after the Crimean Khanate had come into existence. The Crimean Tatars were forcibly expelled to Central Asia by Joseph Stalin's government as a form of collective punishment, on the grounds that some had joined the invading Waffen-SS, forming Tatar legions, during World War II. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Crimean Tatars began to return to the region. According to the 2001 Ukrainian population census, 60% of the population of Crimea are ethnic Russians and 24% are ethnic Ukrainians. Jews in Crimea were historically Krimchaks and Karaites. The 1879 census for the Taurida Governorate reported a Jewish population of 4.20%, not including a Karaite population of 0.43%. The Krimchaks were targeted for annihilation during Nazi occupation. The number of Crimea Germans was 60,000 in 1939. During World War II, they were forcibly deported on the orders of Stalin, as they were regarded as a potential fifth column. This was part of the 800,000 Germans in Russia who were relocated within the Soviet Union during Stalinist times. The 2001 Ukrainian census reports just 2,500 ethnic Germans in Crimea. Besides the Crimean Germans, Stalin in 1944 also deported 70,000 Greeks, 14,000 Bulgarians, and 3,000 Italians. Life expectancy at birth. Religion. In 2013, Orthodox Christians made up 58% of the Crimean population, followed by Muslims and believers in God without religion. Following the 2014 Russian annexation of Crimea, 38 out of the 46 Ukrainian Orthodox Church Kyiv Patriarchate parishes in Crimea ceased to exist. In 3 cases, churches were seized by the Russian authorities. Notwithstanding the annexation, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church kept control of its eparchies in Crimea. Culture. Alexander Pushkin visited Bakhchisarai in 1820 and later wrote the poem The Fountain of Bakhchisarai. Crimea was the background for Adam Mickiewicz's seminal work, the Crimean Sonnets, inspired by his 1825 travel. A series of 18 sonnets constitute an artistic telling of a journey to and through the Crimea. They feature romantic descriptions of the Oriental nature and culture of the East, which show the despair of an exile longing for the homeland, driven from his home by a violent enemy. Ivan Ivazovsky, the 19th-century marine painter of Armenian origin, who is considered one of the major artists of his era, was born in Feodosia and lived there for the most part of his life. Many of his paintings depict the Black Sea. He also created battle paintings during the Crimean War. Crimean Tatar singer Jamila won the Eurovision Song Contest 2016 representing Ukraine with her song 1944, about the historic deportation of Crimean Tatars in that year by Soviet authorities. Sport. Following Crimea's vote to join Russia and subsequent annexation in March 2014, the top football clubs withdrew from the Ukrainian leagues. Some clubs registered to join the Russian leagues, but the Football Federation of Ukraine objected. UEFA ruled that Crimean clubs could not join the Russian leagues but should instead be part of a Crimean league system. The Crimean Premier League is now the top professional football league in Crimea. A number of Crimean-born athletes have been given permission to compete for Russia instead of Ukraine at future competitions, including Vera Rebrik, the European javelin champion. Due to Russia currently being suspended from all international athletic competitions, Rebrik participates in tournaments as a neutral athlete. Gallery. See also: 2014 Russian military intervention in Ukraine. Crimean Gothic. List of cities in Crimea. Politics of Crimea. Russian-Ukrainian Friendship Treaty of 1997. International recognition of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic.